Thank you so much for joining us. I am Samantha. I'm the co-founder of Talent and Truth, and I am joined today by my fellow business partner and co-founder, Sabine Kühn. Today, we are tackling a question that we've been hearing more and more over the last few months, and that question is it still worth posting on LinkedIn? So the reason we wanted to have this conversation now is because a couple weeks ago, Sabine actually posted a video on her LinkedIn, and it went a little bit viral in the sense that there were a lot of comments and there's a lot of feedback from people who had interpreted Sabine's video as being that she'd fallen out of love with LinkedIn, that it wasn't really a platform that really deserved her attention anymore. So it was something that we had a few clients reach out to us about, some people in her DMs as well. And so we kind of wanted to address that here today. So what we're going to be talking about is the feeling of disconnection, I guess, that she had with the platform. And obviously there's a rise of AI generated content and all of the AI generated comments people are seeing in their feed. So it's definitely an interesting topic. There's a lot of people resonating with this at the minute. And so the conversation we want to bring up is, with the platform feeling a little bit more, I guess, AI generated than ever before, is it worth being on the platform? So as always, we would love for this conversation to be collaborative. So if you have any questions or any opinions as we go, please feel free to drop them into the comments and we will address them as they surface. So just to jump into it then, I want to hand over to Sabine. I have a question because for those who haven't seen the video, I think it would be useful to understand what prompted you to actually post that video.
Thanks, Samantha. And hi, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in. I'm very excited about this topic and, of course, very passionate about it as well. What prompted me to share that video was I felt let down and I felt disheartened. I've been actively creating content on LinkedIn probably since 2018, 2019. And I felt, especially the last year, a little bit disengaged. And most of the time, or the I would say contributing factor is the fact that I've been getting so much AI slop comments on my content. The majority of it, what I can see, especially when I'm writing content and it's sort of a written post, and what I'm finding sort of the pattern is that what people tend to do, or what I assume they're doing, is pretty much a copy and paste, put the post into their AI, generate some sort of comment and just dump it back onto LinkedIn again. And I write my own content, I manage my own comments, I do my own DMs, I do all of that myself. And I felt, at least over the last year, that I was predominantly having a conversation with robots. And when you are doing that day in, day out, responding to comments that are AI generated, when you're responding to DMs that are AI generated, and you don't actually know if the person on the other end is reading it, if they're even acknowledging it, if they even know what you're trying to say, it feels a little bit demotivating. And so I hit a point a couple of months ago, and most of the last few weeks, where it's just been annoying me more and more. And as somebody who cares deeply about what they put out, I wanted to see if other people were feeling the same way. And second to that, I also wanted to try a different approach to my LinkedIn. And so I predominantly have been writing content. And so I thought, well, let me switch things up. Let me test this theory. If I film a piece of video content, meaning people actually have to listen, they actually have to watch, they have to invest their time, am I going to get a better outcome? Am I going to, yes, I'm going to sacrifice on some of that engagement, but I'm also going to get potentially a better outcome. And so that's what I tried to do with that video, is actually just test a theory. Thankfully, it resonated with a lot of people. And in some ways, I could prove my theory. And that is also a large contributing factor as to why I've started integrating more video content into my feed, into my content, just to make sure that whoever's engaging is actually interested in what I have to say, is absorbing it, is thinking about it, and then is intentionally engaging. And that for me is what the platform is about. It's about intentionality and making sure that the stuff I say, the stuff I have to contribute actually lands and has an impact.
Yeah, nice. And just to comment as well, I think we've all probably experienced that, I guess, the disappointment of having someone regurgitate your post into a comment. And it feels a little insulting, I think, especially when you are the type of person who puts so much thought and detail into your post. And I know I'm an overthinker, and I will think about my posts. I like to be quite personal in mine. And so I think when I get something back that I know has just been not even, read and consumed and felt the way that I designed it to be, it can be quite demoralizing. So I think there's probably a lot of people who certainly feel that way. What has been the biggest shift then, I suppose, that you've seen? Obviously, we've been creating content for our clients since 2019. What is the biggest shift that you are seeing on LinkedIn in the last few years?
I'm going to take it back to 2019 because I think that context is important so that people know where our opinions are coming from and what context we have. So we've been doing this since about 2018, 2019 is when you and I first started posting content. That's when we started our agency. And back then, there was a very high barrier to entry for posting on LinkedIn. Back then, we still trusted strangers on the internet. And so back then, if you were active on LinkedIn, if you were publishing content, if you sounded smart, the assumption was that you were a trustworthy person. And as a result of that, people were open to working with you. And so many years ago, we saw it ourselves. If we posted a single post on LinkedIn, just one post, you could get 20, 30, 40 leads of that because that single post created authority, trust, likability, and it positioned you in the way that you needed to be positioned. So you don't have to think about all these other things. And so that was our context, was getting to know a platform that was so powerful. And if you just had to, show up, you basically could achieve success. And so I would say it was incredible back then. I wish I had leveraged it more back then. Now, if you look at it today, there's no barrier to entry. There is nothing. Anyone can post, anyone can sound smart, and sounding smart is no longer this unique thing. We can all make things sound incredibly intelligent. And I think because of that, we're all almost on the same level as it relates to sounding smart, appearing professional, appearing likable, appearing competent to some degree. And so I would say the level that people no longer trust if you're posting, trust that you know what you're doing, trust that it's you. I know I feel that when I'm seeing other content. And so as a result, you've got so many hoops that you need to jump through to establish the likability, the trust, the authority. And so it's no longer as easy as it was back then. There are a few factors that contributed towards that. Of course, you've got AI that's enabled it. And just want to emphasize, I do love AI. I think it's a fantastic tool, but I don't like the way that it's changed LinkedIn fundamentally in the way that we've behaved. And so because of that, you've got more people on the platform. I think I read a stat recently where over the last 3 years, LinkedIn's seen an increase of, I think it's over 40% of people actually posting content. So if you imagine 40% more are publishing content online, naturally, you are competing for visibility. Back in the day, it was just you and I, Sam, showing up on LinkedIn and a few other people. And so the community was really small. Nowadays, it's like hundreds and thousands and millions. And that is great. But of course, there's also a consequence. For every good thing, there's a bad thing. And so that's the first thing is like you've got AI, you're competing for visibility. And so now you're having to try a lot harder. You're having to do different things. You're having to be a lot more patient. And you're also having to measure different things as well. So you can no longer think that the one post is going to equal to leads. And so the whole way that I've approached LinkedIn has changed because of these different changes that have happened naturally over the last couple of years.
Yeah. And what are some of the ways, I suppose, that that you've adapted? And, what would you suggest to people listening to this as being, kind of the key for moving forward then? If, posting once on LinkedIn isn't going to have the same impact it had years ago, what do we do instead?
Great question. And instead of just having to do one thing, you now need to do 5 things. So I look at it as 5 different things that you need to do to succeed on LinkedIn, or at least to have the desired impact. First things first, before you even post about content or you start posting content, you need to look at your positioning and you need to look at whether your positioning is aligned with your LinkedIn profile. Again, back in the day, this wasn't a thing. You didn't have to even bother about updating your biography. You know, if you had a great headline, that was good enough. I think for the first 3 years on LinkedIn, I didn't have a biography. I just put my email address, and that literally helped us build a 7-figure business. Whereas now you really have to obsess about your positioning, and you have to obsess about your profile and make sure that all of those things are aligned with who you're wanting to attract, with where you're wanting to go, and whatever it is that your goals are. So looking at your headline, looking at your biography, experience section, updating your skills, your banner. I would say there's like 20 things that you now need to think about just alone when it comes to your positioning. So that's the first thing. That's a lot more important today than it was a couple of years ago. The second thing is, yes, you need to be active. You need to be creating content, and you need to do that consistently. You can no longer just show up whenever it feels like, whenever you feel inspired. I used to be that person. And if you scroll down to my LinkedIn from a couple of months ago, even that was me. Is I was waiting for inspiration, and then I would eventually post something and sit back and think, where are my leads now? Let me, why aren't we going viral? But that's no longer the case. You have to be, I'm going to beat a dead horse a little bit, but you have to be consistent. You have to make sure that what you're saying is high quality content, and you can't let your numbers distract you. That for me is something where some things tank, some things do really, really well, but you cannot let numbers distract you. And so second part to success after positioning would be content creation, making sure it's consistent, it's high quality, it's aligned with your goals, and it's something that you can sustain in the long term. Then third part to this, and again, I feel like I'm beating a dead horse, but so many people don't do this, and that is engagement. That is the simple act of replying to comments, the simple act of finding content that you resonate with, and sharing a thoughtful comment back. And this doesn't mean you get some AI generated garbage and publish it. You actually have to spend time, think about it, and respond something thoughtful. And so engaging on others people's content is super important because obviously it helps from a networking perspective. It also helps to get eyeballs onto your profile, which ultimately, if your profile is set up correctly and you have all the things in place, it's going to help you convert. Second, or rather the third point after engagement and doing that consistently, is looking at how are you actively building your network? How are you building your community? The most valuable part about LinkedIn is that you can choose and you can literally send connection requests to the ideal person that you want to connect with. And most people don't do this. They kind of just wait for, again, sit back and wait for things to come their way. But if you had to invest, I don't know, an hour every week sending connection requests to the people that you want to engage with and the people that you want to potentially influence or have in your network, again, that is going to make an impact. Then taking those conversations into the DMs, having a chat, not to sell something or to get people to do a particular action, but just to show up intentionally and to connect with that person. And then ultimately what you want to do is take that conversation offline. So having a plan in place to build your network, to build your community, again, is going to help you show up more effectively on the platform, or rather utilize it. And then lastly, looking at variety. So just to recap, we've got positioning, content, engagement, network, and variety. Now, I like to see LinkedIn as my playground. So sometimes I post something that's long form. Sometimes I write an article. Sometimes I write something that's a little bit shorter. Sometimes I play around with video content. Sometimes it's a slider. And so I would highly encourage you to play with it. Instead of just sticking to like one format and one thing only, play with it, see what sticks, see what you like as well, see what type of content you enjoy doing. I like video content because I feel like people get a sense for my personality, for how I communicate, maybe a little bit of sarcasm as well. And so I think when it comes to looking at your content mix, having some variety and playing around with that is important, because it's going to give you data. It's going to help you understand what's really working. And it's going to also give people different ways to engage with you and to get to know you. Because if I write something versus if I record something, the energy is different, the impact is different, the engagement is different as well. And so that's another thing that you can consider.
Yeah, I think it's an important point actually looking at the data and what LinkedIn allows you to do now, which previously you couldn't do, is to actually see the back end data on every post. And so you can actually see now, who is the audience looking at it? What, industries do they come from? What countries do they come from?
Mm.
And all of this stuff is so important to be able to determine, am I reaching the people who I actually need to be reaching? And if I'm not, how do I need to adjust my content? And I'll give you an example. Two, for instance. So I have one client, and his target audience is junior procurement professionals. And what I've noticed over the last couple of years that works really well for him is slider content or anything that's like an illustration, something like an infographic, just shareable and savable pieces of
Mm.
information that junior procurement professionals can just save into their camera reel, share with their friends, and just remember it. And I do a lot of checklists for this client because for his audience, they find it to be so useful. And I
Yeah.
see it in the numbers. We see it in the number of saves and the number of just DMs that he's getting where people are just like, can you please create more of this stuff? And so a lot of my time is actually thinking, well, how can I make this as most useful for his audience? And so
Yeah.
I spend a lot of time doing that. And we have another client who is very focused on at the moment with reaching an audience in the United States and in India. And
Mm-hmm.
so I see on the back end, okay, well, 6 months ago, we're not actually getting people in either of those, markets. We're getting lots of people from the United Kingdom and from the Middle East. But how do we change the content then to reach those people? And so I just started creating content again, about his industry, but more specific to the United States and to India. And
Yeah.
so I post about cricket, because immediately you start getting people from, India who are interested in that subject. Talking about supply chains in India, talking about giant events and the back end,
Mm.
that goes into organizing events of that scale. And again, bringing it back to his industry, but also targeting a specific type of person that he's looking for. So there's so many different ways that if you look at the data behind every single post, it will actually give you a lot of information so that you can tailor your content perfectly moving forward. So
Yeah.
data cannot be overseen.
Yeah, I want to actually touch on something because it made me think of this concept of restraint. And I'm someone who I have a lot in my mind, and especially on LinkedIn, I think back in the day, at least, I used to just talk, whatever was on my mind, I would just dump it out there. And thankfully, it resonated with a lot of people. But I guess something that you can look at it as a positive or a negative, I think it's a good thing, is that the way that the algorithms change now and the way that the algorithm is scanning content and therefore also distributing content is that if you are intentional with how you're crafting your post,
Mm,
meaning if you're clear about who the target audience should be, if the topic is clear and in alignment with your profile,
mm,
if all of these things are so clear and obvious that the algorithm can say, right, so this should go to someone based in India or based in the US within this profession is going to resonate with this piece of content, then it's going to reach that person specifically. And so coming back to that concept of restraint, and again, just touching on how the platform has changed, is you need to practice a little bit more restraint and a little bit more focus, which again, positioning why that's so important. But if you're able to almost like focus on that, you're going to again reach your target audience and have that impact.
mm,
So understanding what is it that you want, looking at the numbers, looking at what are you putting out there, can it be more specific so that it's being served to the right people, and then looking at obviously all the other things that follow from there.
yeah. And actually, funnily, like I made this mistake myself where I generally post about executive branding and strategy, but I have a dog. And so I posted, I think maybe 3 times about my dog in any shape, in some shape or form. And the algorithm has decided that I need to be served with every post about someone putting their dog down. And that has been almost exclusively my algorithm when I open my platform for the last 2 months
Mm.
has been the first thing I see is someone saying goodbye to their animal. And I've built this algorithm brick by brick, because I've obviously gone out and I've shared something that is not actually in alignment with what I want to see. And so I'm trying to not talk about my dog now because it's
Yeah.
not doing me any favors. And so I have to kind of undo that. But that I think illustrates perfectly actually how your algorithm can be changed so quickly based on what you're
Oh, yeah.
posting. And it will decide, okay, well, this woman obviously loves dogs. And so I have to feed her with all of the dog content in the world. Never mind, it's so depressing. But it's these types of things that you never really had to be so mindful about before. But now when you have LLMs that are picking up on all of these search terms and keywords, you really have to practice that restraint and just think, okay, I would like to share this, but is it going to serve my algorithm or is it going to harm it? So
yeah, good point.
yeah, right. So let's just chat about then. So obviously, you've got some opinions on LinkedIn. Is it the place to still be? Do people need to broaden their strategies? Is there still value in posting here? What is kind of your takeaway for people listening now?
Yeah. So I guess the most asked question is it still worth it? And there are I have many opinions about the platform. For me personally, it is still worth it. However, and I'll go into a little bit more detail now. First things first, we have to recognize and understand that LinkedIn is a distribution platform. It is not your personal brand. It is not your sales engine, your lead generation engine. It is a platform. And so previously, and again, we made this mistake. Previously, you could use it as your only distribution platform, and that could be your sales engine, lead generation engine, everything in one. That is no longer the case. So it is a platform. Previously, you could have one and you were good. However, now what I recommend is, yes, you do want to diversify. You do want to look at other platforms as well that align with your target audience and also align with how you want to show up. It is easy for me to say you need to be on Instagram and TikTok and all of these other things, but you also have to consider the reality of being on Instagram means you need to film video content. Is that something that you want to do? Or is a place like Substack better for you? Or is a place like creating a newsletter better for you? And so I think not making LinkedIn your whole world, but a small part of it is really important. So almost just zooming out and being like, right, it's no longer everything, but it's just something or a part of it. That's the first shift that I would make so that it can still be worth it to you and it's still going to have some impact. So expanding on distribution channels is my first part to that. Second thing is, when it comes to is LinkedIn still worth it, you have to recognize in today's world, you are no longer just marketing or speaking to humans. You are also training LLMs. So we essentially have two target audiences. As sad or I guess as demoralizing as that sounds, but we're no longer just posting because we want to be out there and connect with people, but we're also training LLMs on what we do, on how we communicate, on whether or not we're trustworthy, on whether or not we're the number one expert they should recommend. And so when it comes to showing up on LinkedIn and if it's worth it, there is that second part to it that you need to acknowledge, because LinkedIn is training LLMs about you, who you are, whether or not you are someone worth doing business with. And so because of that second audience that we are also speaking to and training, it is worth it. It's something that I recommend you continue doing if LinkedIn aligns with your goals, because again, there's no one size fits all approach. And then the final part with LinkedIn being worth it, of course, it matters to have likes, comments, to have that feedback, to have great engagement. What I love to use LinkedIn as is a playground. And so for me, LinkedIn is the place where I just get to have fun. I get to think, I get to communicate my thoughts, I get to process my thoughts. And so if you ignore the fact that you need to make sales and leads and all of these likes and comments and stuff, and you just think to yourself, right, let me actually just understand like what's going on in here and how I think about my industry. Let me practice that writing muscle and use LinkedIn as a place to almost, play around with it. It immediately removes the pressure of needing sales at the end of every single post. And so that is how I see LinkedIn as, is I see it as a playground. I see it as a place to, yes, I'm training LLMs as well on who I am and what I talk about. I see it as a distribution channel. And then, of course, I also see it as a place to meet people, to connect with people, to potentially do business with people, to have a little fun. But I would say it's no longer my entire world anymore. And over the last few months, I've diversified. I'm on Instagram now. I'm on YouTube now. I'm just starting a podcast. I'm on Substack now. And so I'm playing with different channels. We've got a newsletter as well. So we're trying to take the conversation offline, which again is important because I might have 5 or 6 new channels now, but I still don't own any of them. And so recognizing that it can get taken away at any point in time, you want to always take that conversation offline, get somebody onto a newsletter, WhatsApp group, some sort of connect, and be able to intentionally foster that relationship as well. So it is worth it, but only if you're doing other things as well. And if you're also recognizing the fact that there are other metrics, some that you cannot measure, because having fun and testing and thinking clearly is not necessarily a metric per se, but there is a benefit to it, because the more you practice that muscle, the better you become at articulating yourself. You can then go into hosting a workshop. You feel more confident in the boardroom. You feel more confident doing public speaking because you have a place where you can actually stress test your thinking and whether or not it's landing.
Yeah. And so many of our clients will give that feedback as being the almost important benefit to the work that they do with us. It's secondary to actually having a LinkedIn presence and to seeing the numbers. And whilst those things are great for your ego, I think for them being able to walk into a room with confidence and to be able to deliver articulately what they've actually been thinking and playing with for, weeks and months and years, it's really important. And I just want to add to your point about LinkedIn being a bit of a playground. I think there's still a misconception that LinkedIn is a place to be professional and that it's not there for play. And I think increasingly it is becoming a place where people want to see the humanity and they want to see, the person behind the posts. And I think when we are inundated with so much AI content, it's more important than ever to actually inject personality and inject some of that personal storytelling into your posts and to be playful and to not be, afraid of what people are going to think. And I think that misconception of it being a purely professional platform is hopefully dying away at the speed it should, because it's a beautiful place to be when you're actually being served with the type of content that you want to be seeing, when it's deeply human, and when you actually get the benefit from both posting good stuff and having it being read by people, but also being able to consume the stuff that makes a difference. I am mindful of time. Oh, sorry.
I actually want to ask you, Sam, your opinion. Is it still worth it for you? Because, you've been on the platform as long as I have. And so what would you advise others?
Yeah, so the role that I take in the business is slightly different to yours. I write for many of our clients, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the creativity it gives me. I love being able to kind of think about the different ways that I can, I guess, make every piece of content stand on its own and for it to be able to have the impact it needs to have. So like you said, I would play around with like the variety. It absolutely makes sense to still be on there. And I think, just not taking it too seriously is probably a good lesson. Play around and still be strategic, and I think there's a happy balance between those things. Use the data to determine how you should be creating content, but then also being a little bit more playful and experimental. And so I would say it absolutely makes a difference. We see it. I create reports for our clients at the end of every month, and I look at the numbers religiously. And I look at their DMs, I speak to them about the different opportunities that come through. And I will say 9 times out of 10, like I said, the benefit is not actually like the post itself. It's not, being live on the platform. It's actually that people are coming through to you, offline. They recognize you at events. They are DMing you privately. They might not even ever like any of your content, and then they'll come to you and say, okay, I want you to facilitate a workshop for us. So there's so much added benefit that, happens behind the scenes that, you cannot measure the success of it based purely on, the numbers you're getting and how many followers you have. It's not the way that LinkedIn is functioning anymore. So yeah, I mean, look, definitely play around with it. I'm the last one to talk about consistency because I'm not the most consistent with my posting, but like, do what you can, show up as often as you can, and I think you will reap the benefits. And if you guys are interested as well, we are hosting a webinar on the 20th of August, actually. And so if you guys do want to dive a little bit more deeper into this and how you can actually build a business off your own thinking and be able to use LinkedIn, to its advantage, then, we'd love to have you guys there. We'll share the link in the comments, and you can have a look at that and see if it's something that might interest you. But I do want to respect everyone's time and just say thank you for joining us today. I think that we can all agree that being on this platform still makes sense. It's the reason we are here, and we are doing the live on the platform. So yeah, thank you everyone for your comments. If we didn't address it, we will come back after the recording and do so. But otherwise, thank you, Sabina. You're a wealth of knowledge, obviously. So thank you for sharing everything. So
I have one more comment just to make, actually, on the if it's worth it. I'll be very quick. Is that what goes around comes around. And so when we think of, is it still worth it? We're saying it is still worth it. Recognize that it's going to continue evolving. And so it's going to keep changing. And so if you just train the muscle and you just almost focus on that, and you focus on the long-term impact that you're going to make versus the short-term ROI that you're seeking, it is going to be worth it. The platform will evolve. They have acknowledged that they're seeing AI slop and AI generated stuff, and they're starting to obviously cut down on engagement pods and all of these things. And so just a final, I guess, word of wisdom is be patient, keep at it. It is worth it. And I do have faith that the platform is going to improve over the coming months and years as well.
Awesome. Thank you for that. And thank you for all of you for joining us today. And we will see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you.